Everything. Every powerful communicator you admire, every leader, persuader, and influencer shares one invisible advantage. They don't just talk better. They think differently. Everything. Their words carry weight because their mind is structured, their voice is intentional, and their presence is controlled. This audiobook is about mastering that invisible edge, everything. So your thoughts become clearer, your speech becomes sharper, and your influence becomes impossible to ignore. Most people don't struggle because they lack intelligence or potential. Everything. They struggle because their minds are loud. Thoughts collide, emotions interrupt logic, and reactions happen faster than understanding. In that noise, clarity has no space to form. Everything. And without clarity, influence is impossible. This chapter is about learning how to quiet the chaos, not by suppressing emotion, but by organizing thought. Everything. Because the most influential people are not the loudest thinkers. They are the clearest. Think about a moment when you said something you later regretted. Not because it was untrue, everything, but because it was unfiltered. The emotion was real, but the timing was wrong. Or consider a moment when you stayed silent even though you knew exactly what needed to be said. Everything. Yet the words refused to line up. In both cases, the issue wasn't courage or knowledge. It was mental disorder. Thoughts arrived without structure. Everything. And emotion took control of the steering wheel. Clarity begins when you stop reacting and start observing. The average mind reacts instantly. Someone says something triggering. Everything. And the body responds before the brain finishes listening. The heart rate changes, the breath shortens, and suddenly the goal shifts from understanding to defending. Everything, but clarity lives in the pause. That small space between stimulus and response is where control exists. The ability to pause is not weakness, it is power. Everything. One of the most effective communicators I ever observed was not particularly charismatic. He didn't use big words or dramatic gestures. Everything. What made him stand out was how slowly and deliberately he responded. When asked a difficult question, he didn't rush to fill the silence. He paused, considered everything, and then spoke with precision. People leaned in not because he demanded attention, but because his clarity created gravity. Silence, when used intentionally, organizes thought. Everything. Mental clarity is a skill, not a personality trait. It is trained through discipline, not talent. The first step is learning to separate thought from emotion. Emotion provides information. Everything. But it is not a strategy. When emotion leads, thinking becomes narrow. You only see what supports your feeling. When thinking leads, emotion becomes useful instead of destructive. Everything. You can still feel deeply without being controlled by what you feel. A simple practice can change this dynamic. When you feel a strong emotional response, do not ask, "How do I feel?" Ask, "Everything. What is actually happening?" Describe the situation as if you were explaining it to someone who wasn't there. Remove judgment. Remove assumptions. Stick to observable facts. Everything. This immediately shifts the brain from reaction to analysis. Clarity begins with accurate description. Another source of mental noise is internal dialogue. The constant self-commentary. Everything. Replaying conversations, imagining arguments, predicting outcomes that haven't happened yet. This mental chatter drains focus and weakens communication. Everything. You cannot speak clearly if your mind is busy arguing with itself. Influential thinkers simplify their internal language. They reduce complexity. They don't entertain every thought, everything. They choose which thoughts deserve attention. Imagine your mind as a room. Every thought you entertain is someone you allow inside. If you let everyone in, the room becomes crowded, loud, everything, and unmanageable. Clear thinkers are selective. They ask, "Is this thought useful right now?" If the answer is no, they don't fight it. They simply don't invite it to stay. Everything. This is not avoidance. It is prioritization. Clarity also comes from knowing what you are trying to achieve before you speak or act. Most people start talking without knowing their objective. Everything. They talk to express, not to move. But influence requires direction. Before you speak, ask yourself one question. Everything. What outcome do I want from this interaction? Understanding your desired outcome organizes your thoughts automatically. Irrelevant points fall away. Emotion settles. Everything. Purpose sharpens language. There is a noticeable difference between someone who thinks clearly and someone who thinks quickly. Speed can impress, but clarity convinces. Everything. Clear thinkers are not rushed. They are intentional. They allow their thoughts to mature before releasing them. This is especially important in moments of conflict. When emotions rise, everything. Clarity becomes rare. The person who maintains clarity in that moment gains instant authority, even without raising their voice. This does not mean suppressing emotion. Everything. Suppressed emotion leaks out sideways. Instead, it means acknowledging emotion without letting it hijack the message. You can feel anger and still speak calmly. Everything. You can feel uncertainty and still ask strong questions. Emotional awareness combined with mental structure creates calm authority. People trust those who appear grounded within themselves. Everything. Another powerful practice is mental ordering. When preparing to speak, especially in important situations, organize your thoughts into simple structures. One main point. Everything, 2 or 3 supporting ideas. One clear takeaway. This prevents rambling and reduces anxiety. When your mind knows the order, your body relaxes. Confidence often comes not from certainty, everything, but from structure. You've likely experienced moments when someone explained a complex idea in a way that felt simple and obvious. That is clarity in action. Everything. They didn't make the idea smaller. They made it organized. They filtered out the unnecessary and highlighted the essential. This is the mark of a trained mind. Everything. Clarity is not about knowing more. It is about choosing less. Mental clarity also requires honesty. Many people confuse noise with depth. Everything. They overthink because they are avoiding a simple truth. Clear thinkers are willing to face uncomfortable conclusions. They don't decorate reality to protect their ego. They accept what is everything and then decide what to do next. This creates internal alignment which is felt externally. People sense when someone is not at war with their own thoughts. Everything. A practical way to train this is journaling with structure. Not emotional dumping, but intentional writing. Ask one focused question and answer it directly. No storytelling, no justification, everything. Just clarity. Over time, this trains the mind to move from emotion to precision more quickly. The way you think on paper becomes the way you think under pressure. Everything. Clarity also deepens listening. When your mind is organized, you don't listen to respond. You listen to understand. You notice what is being said and what is being avoided. You hear patterns, everything, not just words. This makes your responses feel intelligent and thoughtful, even when they are brief. Influence often comes from saying less, not more. As you practice thinking in clarity, everything, something subtle changes. Your reactions slow down. Your speech becomes measured. People interrupt you less. Not because you demand respect, but because your presence signals control. Everything. Calm authority is not aggressive. It is stable. It comes from knowing that you don't need to rush, prove, or overpower. You trust your ability to think clearly even under pressure. Everything. This is the foundation of influence. Before words persuade, before presence commands, before leadership emerges, the mind must be ordered. Noise creates confusion. Clarity creates confidence. Everything. And confidence, when rooted in calm thinking, becomes a force that others naturally respond to. The more you train your mind to pause, organize, and choose intentionally, everything, the less energy you waste managing chaos. Thought becomes clean, speech becomes deliberate, and influence stops being something you try to do, everything, and starts becoming something you naturally embody. Most people believe that powerful speakers are born with a gift. They assume confidence is something you either have or you don't, everything, and that clarity in speech belongs only to a rare few. But the truth is far simpler and far more empowering. Powerful communication is not about sounding impressive. Everything. It is about speaking with intention. The moment you become intentional with your words, your tone, and your pace, your communication begins to carry weight. People don't just hear you. Everything. They feel you. Think about a time when someone spoke and instantly held your attention. It wasn't necessarily because they used complicated language or dramatic volume. In fact, everything. The most persuasive speakers often sound calm, almost effortless. Their words arrive clearly, without rush, without excess. That clarity is not accidental. Everything. It is the result of knowing exactly what they want to say and why they are saying it. Purposeful speech begins before you ever open your mouth. It starts with thought, discipline, everything. When your thoughts are scattered, your speech reflects that chaos. You ramble. You over-explain. You search for words while speaking. But when your thinking is clear, everything, your words line up naturally. This is why the most effective communicators take a moment before they speak. Not because they are unsure, everything, but because they are choosing their words instead of letting words choose them. Consider how often people talk simply to fill silence. They speak out of nervousness, habit, everything, or the fear of being misunderstood. In those moments, speech loses power. Purposeful speakers do the opposite. They allow silence to work for them. They pause. They breathe. Everything. They let their words arrive fully formed. That pause communicates confidence even before a single sentence is spoken. Tone is the emotional carrier of your message. Everything. You can say the right words with the wrong tone and lose your influence instantly. A calm tone suggests control. A steady tone signals certainty. Everything. A rushed or shaky tone tells the listener that even you may not fully believe what you're saying. This is why confidence in speech is not about volume. Everything. Speaking louder does not make you more persuasive. Speaking more grounded does. Imagine two people delivering the same message. One speaks quickly, nervously, trying to convince. Everything. The other speaks slowly, evenly, as if they already know they are being heard. The words may be identical, but the impact is completely different. People trust the second speaker more. Everything. Not because of what they say it, but because of how they say it. Their tone creates a sense of authority without aggression. Pacing is another invisible force in communication. When you rush, everything, you signal urgency or insecurity. When you slow down, you signal confidence and control. Slowing your pace gives your listener time to absorb your message. Everything. It also gives your words room to land. A well-placed pause can be more persuasive than an extra sentence. Think about moments when you felt truly respected in conversation. Chances are, everything. The person speaking wasn't overwhelming you with words. They were clear, direct, present. They didn't speak over you or rush past important points. Everything. They respected the conversation enough to let it breathe. That respect is felt instantly, and it invites trust. Everything. Intentional language also means choosing words that serve clarity rather than ego. Many people believe sounding intelligent requires complex vocabulary. In reality, everything. Clarity is far more powerful than complexity. The most influential communicators simplify without dumbing down. They speak in a way that makes others feel included. Everything. Not impressed from a distance. When people understand you easily, they are more likely to trust you. A useful practice is to ask yourself a simple question before speaking. Everything. What is the one point I want this person to remember? Not 5 points. Not everything you know. One clear idea. When you speak with that focus, your words naturally become sharper. Everything. You stop circling, you stop drifting, you speak with direction. Storytelling plays a powerful role in purposeful communication. Facts inform, but stories connect. Everything. When you share an experience, even a small one, your words become human. People lean in because they recognize themselves in your story. The key is not exaggeration, but sincerity. Everything. Speak from real moments, real observations. Authentic stories carry emotional weight without needing decoration. There is also strength in speaking less. Everything. Many people try to prove their value by saying more. But influence grows when your words are measured. When you speak only what matters, everything. People pay attention because they know you are not wasting their time. Over time, this builds a reputation. When you speak, it matters. Everything. Confidence in speech does not mean never stumbling or searching for a word. It means staying grounded when you do. Instead of apologizing excessively or rushing to recover, pause. Everything. Smile if appropriate. Continue calmly. Your composure in those moments communicates more confidence than perfect delivery ever could. Respect is not demanded through speech. Everything. It is earned through consistency. When your words align with your tone, and your tone aligns with your intention, people feel safe listening to you. They sense authenticity. Everything. They sense control. Over time, your voice becomes familiar in a powerful way. People trust it. Everything. One of the most empowering shifts you can make is realizing that you are allowed to take space when you speak. You do not need to rush to be liked. Everything. You do not need to soften your message to be accepted. Speak clearly. Speak honestly. Speak with care. Those who matter will respect you for it. Think of speaking as an act of leadership. Everything. Even in everyday conversations. Whether you are sharing an idea, setting a boundary, or expressing an opinion, your voice shapes how others experience you. Everything. When you speak with purpose and precision, you show that you value yourself and the conversation. Over time, this way of speaking changes how you see yourself. Everything. You begin to feel more centered, more confident, more present. You no longer fear being misunderstood because you trust your ability to communicate clearly. Everything. That confidence becomes part of your identity, and others respond to it naturally. This is not about performance. It is about alignment. When your thoughts, emotions, and words move together, everything. Your speech becomes powerful without effort. You no longer try to influence. You simply communicate with clarity, and influence follows. Everything. Most people believe influence comes from having the right words at the right time. They think persuasion is about clever phrases, strong arguments, or sounding intelligent. Everything. But influence doesn't begin with words at all. It begins much deeper. in the invisible layers of human psychology that guide how people feel, decide, and act. Everything, often without realizing it themselves. If you want to influence people, you must first understand one simple truth: humans are not driven by logic first. Logic comes later. Everything, often as justification. What truly drives people is attention, emotion, and trust. Every decision, every agreement, every moment of being persuaded passes through these three forces. Everything. Once you understand how they work together, communication stops being a struggle and starts becoming alignment. Think about the last time someone truly convinced you of something. Everything. It wasn't because they overwhelmed you with facts. It was because they captured your attention, made you feel something, and created a sense of trust. Only then did the words land. Everything. Attention is the first gate. Without it, nothing else matters. The human brain is constantly filtering information, deciding what is worth noticing and what should be ignored. Everything. Influence begins when you learn to respect that filter instead of fighting it. People pay attention to what feels relevant, emotionally charged, or connected to their identity. Everything. They don't listen longer because someone is louder. They listen because something resonates. This is why stories are so powerful. A story bypasses resistance. When someone tells a story, everything, the brain stops arguing and starts imagining. Attention naturally locks in. Imagine two people giving advice. One lists rules and instructions. The other shares a personal experience. Everything. How they struggled, failed, learned, and adapted. The second person almost always feels more influential, even if they say fewer words. The listener isn't just hearing information. Everything. They're experiencing it. Emotion is the second force, and it's where most influence truly happens. People remember how you make them feel far longer than they remember what you say. Everything. Emotion gives information weight. Without emotion, words feel flat, forgettable, and disposable. With emotion, even simple ideas become powerful. This doesn't mean manipulation. Everything. It means awareness. If you understand emotion, you can communicate with empathy instead of force. You can meet people where they are instead of talking over them. For example, everything. When someone is afraid, logic alone won't move them. Fear narrows attention and hardens resistance. But acknowledge the fear, and suddenly the door opens. When people feel understood, everything, they become receptive. Think of a manager trying to motivate a struggling employee. One approach is cold and analytical: numbers, performance metrics, expectations, everything. Another approach begins with recognition of effort, acknowledgement of pressure, and reassurance of belief. The second approach doesn't ignore logic, but it places emotion first. Everything. That's why it works. Trust is the third and most fragile force. Trust determines whether influence lasts or collapses. You can capture attention once. You can stir emotion occasionally. Everything. But without trust, influence becomes temporary or even destructive. Trust is built when words and actions align, when consistency replaces performance, and when people sense authenticity. Everything. People trust those who feel grounded, not those who feel desperate. This is why influence increases when you stop trying too hard to persuade. Desperation leaks through tone, body language, everything, and pacing. Calm confidence builds trust because it signals stability. When someone doesn't need your agreement to feel validated, their words carry more weight. Everything. Notice how the most influential people speak. They are rarely rushed. They allow silence. They don't over-explain. Silence, when used intentionally, creates psychological space. Everything. It signals certainty. It gives the listener room to process and decide. Many people talk themselves out of influence by filling every gap with more words, more justification, more pressure. Everything. Another crucial aspect of influence is identity. People protect their identity fiercely. If your message threatens how someone sees themselves, resistance rises instantly. Everything. Influence increases when communication supports or gently expands identity rather than attacking it. Instead of saying, "You're wrong," influential communicators say, "Everything." There's another way to look at this. Instead of saying, "You need to change," they say, "This might help you become even better at what you already value." Everything. This is why arguments rarely change minds. Arguments activate defense, not openness. Influence is not about winning debates. It's about guiding perspectives. When someone feels respected, everything, they explore ideas. When they feel challenged, they retreat. Real influence also understands timing. People are more open when they feel safe, heard, and unpressured. Everything. Trying to persuade someone at the wrong emotional moment is like planting seeds in frozen ground. The message might be correct, but the environment isn't ready. Everything. Influential communicators learn to read emotional cues, tone shifts, posture, eye contact, and adjust accordingly. Consider everyday conversations. Everything. A friend venting about their problems isn't asking for solutions right away. They're asking for understanding. If you jump straight to advice, influence is lost. But if you listen, everything, reflect their feelings, and validate their experience, influence naturally follows. Eventually, when you speak, your words land deeper. Influence also grows through self-control. Everything. The ability to manage your own emotions gives you power in conversations. When you don't react impulsively, you stay strategic. When you don't get defensive, you stay persuasive. Everything. Emotional mastery isn't suppression, it's regulation. It's choosing responses instead of being driven by them. Think of someone who remains calm under pressure. Everything. Their presence alone influences the room. People feel safer, more focused, more willing to listen. Emotional stability creates psychological leadership. Everything. Others unconsciously look to that person for direction. Another overlooked element is repetition with variation. People rarely change their thinking after hearing something once. Everything. Influence is cumulative. The same core message delivered in different ways, at different times, slowly reshapes perception. This is how leaders inspire movements and teachers shape mindsets. Everything. They don't say something once and expect transformation. They reinforce it through stories, examples, and consistent behavior. Actionable influence begins with awareness. Before you speak, everything. Ask yourself, what does this person care about? What are they feeling right now? What do they fear losing, and what do they hope to gain? When you align your communication with those answers, everything, resistance softens. Slow your speech slightly. It signals thoughtfulness. Lower your tone when emphasizing important points. It draws attention instead of demanding it. Everything. Use pauses to let meaning sink in. These small adjustments change how your message is received. Most importantly, influence grows when you genuinely respect people's autonomy. Everything. True influence doesn't force decisions, it invites them. When people feel they are choosing freely, commitment becomes stronger. Everything. This is why the most persuasive communicators don't corner others. They create space for agreement to emerge naturally. Understanding the psychology of influence isn't about control. Everything. It's about alignment. When attention, emotion, and trust work together, communication becomes smoother, deeper, and more effective. Everything. You stop pushing uphill and start moving with human nature instead of against it. As this awareness settles in, conversations feel less tense. You begin to notice subtle shifts. Everything. People listening longer, responding more thoughtfully, opening up more easily. Influence stops being something you chase and becomes something you embody. Everything. Most people believe authority begins the moment they open their mouth. In reality, it begins long before that. It begins in the way you enter a room. Everything. The way you stand when nothing is happening. The way you listen when someone else is speaking. Presence is not something you announce. It is something people feel. Everything. And the most powerful presence is not loud, aggressive, or demanding. It is quiet, controlled, certain. Think about the most commanding person you've ever encountered. Maybe it was a leader, everything, a teacher, a manager, or even a stranger who seemed unshakable. Chances are they didn't rush their words. They didn't fidget. They didn't over-explain themselves. Their body was calm. Everything. Their eyes were steady. Their movements were intentional. Before they said a single word, the room adjusted to them. That is nonverbal power. Your body is constantly communicating. Everything. Even when your mouth is silent. In fact, silence often speaks louder than speech. When you lack presence, your body leaks insecurity, slouched shoulders, darting eyes, restless hands, everything, rushed movements. You might not notice it, but others do. And without realizing why, they assign you less authority, less credibility, less influence. But the opposite is also true. Everything. When your body is grounded, your movements deliberate, and your energy steady, people listen differently. They lean in. They pause when you pause. Everything. They sense that you are someone worth paying attention to. Presence begins with stillness. Not stiffness, not tension, but calm control. Imagine standing with your feet firmly planted. Everything. Shoulders relaxed, chest open, breathing slow and deep. You're not trying to dominate the space. You're simply comfortable occupying it. That comfort sends a powerful signal. I belong here. Many people rush because they are afraid of silence. They fill gaps with words, explanations, nervous laughter. But silence is not weakness. Silence is confidence. Everything. When you speak and then pause, you create weight. When you listen without interrupting, you create respect. When you allow a moment to breathe before responding, you show emotional control. Everything. There's a simple shift that changes everything. Stop reacting immediately. When someone speaks to you, allow a brief pause before answering. Not an awkward pause, just a thoughtful one. Everything. That pause communicates that you are processing, not scrambling. It slows the rhythm of the interaction and subtly positions you as grounded and composed. Everything. I once watched a junior employee present an idea to a group of senior executives. On paper, his idea was solid, but his delivery betrayed him. He paced back and forth, spoke quickly, everything, and avoided eye contact. He tried to convince the room with more words, more slides, more urgency. The executives nodded politely, but their attention drifted. Later that same day, everything. A different person presented a simpler idea. He stood still. He spoke slowly. He let silence do some of the work. When someone challenged him, he didn't rush to defend himself. He listened. Everything paused, and then responded calmly. The room leaned toward him. His idea carried more weight, not because it was better, but because he carried it with authority. Authority is not forced. Everything, it is allowed. And people allow it when they sense self-control. Your posture alone can transform how you feel and how others perceive you. Everything. An upright posture with relaxed shoulders signals confidence without aggression. A lifted chin, not arrogant, just neutral, signals self-respect. When your body is aligned, your mind follows. Everything. You begin to feel more composed simply by the way you stand or sit. Eye contact is another silent language. Weak eye contact signals uncertainty or submission. Everything. Overly intense eye contact can feel aggressive. The sweet spot is steady and relaxed. When you speak, look at people as if you expect to be heard. When you listen, everything. Maintain eye contact as if their words matter. That balance creates mutual respect. Then there's movement. Powerful people don't move unnecessarily. They don't fidget, tap, everything, or shift constantly. Every movement has intention. When you gesture, it reinforces your point. When you walk, it has direction. Stillness used intentionally is incredibly persuasive. Everything. When you stop moving, people notice. When you pause mid-sentence, attention sharpens. Energy is the invisible layer that ties it all together. You don't need high energy to be influential. Everything. You need stable energy. Calm energy, emotional regulation. When you remain composed under pressure, others subconsciously look to you for direction. Everything. They trust you more because you're not being pulled around by the moment. This is especially important in conflict or high-stakes situations. When emotions rise, everything. The person who stays calm gains power. Not through intimidation, but through contrast. Your calmness becomes an anchor. Your silence becomes a signal that you are not threatened. Everything. And that alone can shift the entire dynamic. Practice this in everyday situations. When someone interrupts you, don't rush to reclaim the floor. Pause. Look at them calmly. Everything. Then continue speaking at your original pace. That small act reasserts authority without confrontation. When someone challenges you, don't immediately justify yourself. Listen fully. Pause. Everything. Then respond with clarity. You don't need to win every moment. You need to hold your center. Presence is also about how you listen. Most people listen to respond, not to understand. Everything. Powerful listeners give their full attention. They don't nod excessively or interrupt to prove engagement. They stay still, focused, and receptive. This makes the speaker feel seen. Everything. And paradoxically, it increases your influence. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you don't need to perform. You don't need to impress. You don't need to prove yourself. Everything. That confidence is felt immediately. It changes the tone of conversations. It changes how people approach you. Developing nonverbal power is not about pretending to be someone else. Everything. It's about removing the habits that dilute your natural authority. The nervous movements, the rushed speech, the fear of silence. As those fade, what remains is presence. Everything. Start paying attention to your default behaviors. Notice how you sit when you're waiting. Notice how you stand when you're listening. Notice how you move when you're unsure. Everything. Awareness is the first step to control. You don't need to change everything at once. Choose one element: posture, eye contact, silence, and practice it deliberately. Over time, everything. Something interesting happens. You stop trying to be commanding and you simply are. Your body learns calm. Your voice slows naturally. Your mind stops racing to fill space. Everything. And people respond differently, not because you demanded respect, but because you embodied it. This is quiet dominance. Not the dominance of force, volume, or ego. Everything. But the dominance of self-mastery. When you control your body, your energy, and your reactions, you control the impression you leave behind. And long before you speak, everything. The room already knows who you are. There comes a moment in every personal growth journey when effort stops being about techniques and starts becoming about identity, everything. This chapter lives in that moment. Because influence, real influence, is not something you switch on when you need it. It is something people feel the moment you enter a room, everything. The moment you speak, and sometimes even when you remain silent. Becoming someone people naturally listen to is not about performing better. It is about being different, everything. Most people try to influence by talking more, explaining harder, or raising their voice internally even if they don't do it out loud. They chase attention, everything. But the people we instinctively listen to do the opposite. They don't chase attention. Attention comes to them. And the reason is simple: their mindset, their speech, everything, and their presence are aligned into one clear signal. Think about someone in your life whose words seem to land differently. It might be a manager, a teacher, a family elder, everything. Or even a quiet friend who rarely speaks but somehow always says the right thing. Notice what they don't do. They don't rush. They don't over-justify. They don't speak to prove their worth. Everything. They speak from it. That difference is everything. Influence begins in the private space of your own mind. Before anyone listens to you, you must listen to yourself. Everything. The people who carry natural authority have a settled inner world. Their thoughts are not scattered. Their values are clear. They know what they stand for, and just as importantly, everything, what they don't. This internal clarity removes the need to seek validation through words. When you stop needing approval, your voice gains weight, everything. Imagine two people saying the exact same sentence. One is internally uncertain, hoping to be accepted. The other is internally grounded, simply expressing what they believe, everything. The words may be identical, but the impact will never be. People don't respond to language alone, they respond to certainty, congruence, and emotional stability. Everything. That is why influence cannot be faked for long. It has to be built from the inside out. There is a quiet shift that happens when you begin to respect your own voice. Everything. You stop interrupting yourself mentally. You stop rehearsing imaginary arguments. You stop shrinking your opinions before they even leave your mouth. Everything. This does not mean you become loud or aggressive. In fact, the opposite happens. You become selective. You speak when it matters. And because you speak less, people listen more. Speech, everything, at this level is no longer about clever phrasing. It is about intention. Every sentence has a purpose. Every pause is deliberate. You no longer talk to fill silence. Everything. You use silence to give your words room to breathe. This is where many people feel uncomfortable because silence exposes insecurity. But when you are comfortable with yourself, everything, silence becomes one of your strongest tools. It signals confidence without saying a word. Think of a time when someone paused before answering you, not because they were confused, everything, but because they were choosing their words carefully. That pause likely made you lean in. It made you curious. It made their response feel more important. This is not manipulation, everything. It is presence. Presence is the ability to be fully where you are, without rushing to escape the moment. Presence is what ties mindset and speech together. Everything. It is what people feel before they process what you say. It shows up in eye contact that is calm, not searching. In posture that is relaxed, not rigid. In breathing that is steady. Everything. Not shallow. These signals tell others that you are comfortable in your own skin, and humans are wired to trust people who appear comfortable with themselves. Everything. A powerful example of this can be seen in everyday conversations. Picture a meeting where one person speaks constantly, offering ideas, defending them, explaining them again, everything, and filling every gap. Then picture another person who listens carefully, nods, asks one precise question, and offers one clear insight. Which person do you remember? Everything. Which one feels more credible? Influence is often the result of restraint, not effort. To build this kind of identity, you must start making small, deliberate changes. Everything. Begin by slowing down your internal pace. When you feel the urge to speak quickly, pause instead. When you feel the need to explain yourself excessively, everything. Stop one sentence earlier than you normally would. Trust that clarity does not require repetition. Trust that your message can stand on its own. Everything. Another powerful shift is learning to speak from experience rather than opinion. People naturally listen to lived truth. When you share something you have observed, felt, everything, or learned firsthand, your words carry authenticity. You are no longer trying to convince, you are simply describing reality as you understand it. Everything. This removes pressure from both you and the listener. It is also important to align your words with your actions. Nothing weakens influence faster than inconsistency. Everything. When your behavior matches your speech, people relax around you. They don't have to analyze or protect themselves. Trust grows quietly. Over time, everything. Your reputation begins to speak before you do. People start paying attention because experience has taught them that when you speak, it's worth hearing. Everything. There is a deep sense of self-respect that grows from this alignment. You stop saying things you don't mean. You stop agreeing just to keep peace. Everything. You stop betraying your own standards for short-term comfort. This doesn't make you difficult, it makes you clear. And clarity is magnetic. People are drawn to those who know who they are. Everything. One of the most freeing realizations on this path is understanding that not everyone needs to listen to you. Influence is not universal approval. Everything. When you release the need to be heard by everyone, you gain the respect of those who matter. You begin to attract the right conversations, the right relationships, everything, and the right opportunities, because your signal is honest. As this identity takes shape, something subtle but powerful happens. You no longer try to influence everything. You simply show up as yourself. Your mindset sets the tone. Your speech reflects your values. Your presence reinforces your credibility. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. Everything. They listen because it feels natural to do so. This is not a destination you arrive at overnight. It is a practice. Some days you will catch yourself rushing or over-explaining. That's fine. Everything. Awareness itself is progress. Each moment you choose calm over urgency, clarity over noise, and respect over approval, you reinforce this identity. Over time, your voice changes. Everything, not in volume, but in weight. Your words don't push, they land. Conversations feel more balanced. People ask for your perspective, and when you speak, everything. There is a quiet sense that what you're saying matters, not because you demand it to, but because you've become someone whose presence carries meaning. Everything. This is what it means to become someone people naturally listen to. Not louder, not sharper, but clearer, calmer, and deeply grounded in who you are.